Recording in progress.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So we're on a series now of the Brahma Viharas. The Brahma Viharas are the beautiful emotions or qualities that we want to engender within ourselves. And they're metta, unconditional loving kindness, compassion, that we're going to do today, known as karuna or anukampa. And then mudita, which is rejoicing in the joy, the happiness of others, or rejoicing in their good deeds. So basically being happy for the happiness of others. And the last one is equanimity, upekkha. So I'm just going to share something with you. So this calligraphy, when you first enter the monastery, when you come in the door, it's sort of facing you. So this is a calligraphy of compassion, but in Chinese, that my Chinese medicine teacher, Dr. Ong, had done for me. So that's, if you didn't know what that was, that's now you know. Yeah, so I had always been taught that compassion, the Pali term for it was karuna, but when I did the word search for compassion in the Pali Canon, which is the words of the Buddha, anukampa came up as a much more common word for compassion. So I tried to see if there was a difference between the two, between karuna and anukampa, but I couldn't find that information. So I don't know if they're exactly the same or slightly different. But but actually anukampa seemed to be more common translation. Now, with our Brahma Viharas, the beautiful emotions, metta, loving friendliness, is sort of like an umbrella feeling because it's just unconditional wishing well for everyone. And then with compassion and mudita, we divide that everybody into two camps. So compassion is when our heart is stirred by the suffering of others, and then there's a wish to help in some way. And mudita is being happy for the happiness of others. So we're dividing everybody into those who are suffering and those that are happy at that moment. Now, there's an important thing to know about compassion. In English, we have two words, sympathy and empathy. And when you're feeling sympathy for someone, you actually feel the pain of the other person. And this is not sustainable. You know, if you're continually feeling the pain, you know, of the suffering of people, or, you know, or the environment or whatever around you, you're going to get sick, you know, or you're going to burn out. So sympathy is not what compassion is. Compassion is empathy. And empathy is sort of understanding, you know, and caring about the suffering of another, but not experience the exact pain yourself. And that allows you, to not burn out, to be able to continue to be of service without burning out. When I first started my training in psychiatry, I definitely was experiencing sympathy. And within a few months of starting my training, I thought I was going to have to quit the training because I was suffering so much. And I just thought, I can't go on like this. But then I talked to somebody, and my brain can't remember who it was I spoke to. Must have been one of my professors. And my brain can't remember what they said, but I did a complete 180 and switched from sympathy to empathy. And that allowed me through the rest of my career to have my heart open and to work with people, and care about them, but not take on the pain. And I made it through my career without burnout or anything like that. So that's an important thing to know. And there's this phrase that goes around that is compassion fatigue. And so that's actually a misnomer, because if you have true compassion, you're not going to have fatigue. It's if you have sympathy that you're definitely going to have fatigue. So this is important. Now, when I did this word search in the Pali Canon for compassion, there were sort of two major ways. Like the majority of citations with compassion fell into two camps. The first was when the Buddha was speaking to an individual or a group of people, then it would say, out of compassion, he taught them the Dhamma. And then the other way, the other place where compassion was very frequently found was that chant, the second chant that we did, that talks about spreading the Brahma Viharas, like spreading compassion in all directions, making it boundless. Now, there was one way, one sutta, and it was Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 5, number 235. And there the Buddha, this is the only place I found where the Buddha was talking about how to show compassion. And he was directing this towards monastics, but I think we can extrapolate from that of how us lay people can show compassion. So I'll just read that to you. So the first was to encourage others in ethical thoughts, words, and deeds. Now, it may not be appropriate to sort of be preaching to people, like, 'cause sometimes, if people have different ideas than you or whatever, they're not very receptive to hear. So you have to be careful about that. I mean, if it's appropriate, then maybe you can share information on more ethical thoughts, words, and deeds. But a very powerful way to share this is in your own behavior. And I know I experienced that when I was young, and didn't have compassion fully developed in my heart, but then was with somebody who did, who was showing more compassion in a particular situation that we were in. Then, it was sort of like an eye-opener to me and inspiring. It was quite inspiring to see somebody with a very open heart and showing compassion. And so that really helped me to develop my compassion. So that's a beautiful way to encourage others in ethical behavior, is just with your own behavior. The second way the Buddha said that we can share compassion is to help people see the truth of the teachings, the truth of the Dhamma. And so I think a nice way to do that is to share your own experience and how you've seen the truth. And so I wrote a little 4-part essay that's on our website under teachings, and then under the drop-down menu of miscellaneous. And then I got 4 essays there on my experience of, first of all, hearing the Dhamma, and then the incredible impact that it had on my life in the following weeks. And so I wrote about that in that section on the website. The third way the Buddha said that we can show compassion is that when others are sick, to encourage them to establish their mindfulness in what is worthy. So how I understand this is if you're, have some suffering in some way, the suffering is the first arrow. And then the second arrow is us weeping and wailing and complaining and, just focusing on how tough our life is. And then that makes our suffering way greater. So what we want to share with people is the holding technique. How when you have suffering, then you send love to that physical aspect of the suffering, but you stay out of your head. You bring yourself away from all that weeping and wailing. And so then you're throwing away that second arrow. And what we want to focus on instead are the factors of awakening, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes. Number 4, the Buddha said that we could show, well, he was talking here to the monastics, but I'll translate to us lay people in a moment. So he said, a monastic gives us lay people the opportunity to make merit by accepting food and other requisites that we offer. So what we as lay people can do, because, we're not monastics receiving, food and shelter and medicine and robes from lay people, is that, if we have somebody that's offering to help us some way, to be open to allow them to help us. This was a lesson that took me a while to learn, because I remember I'd be offering help to others, but I would refuse to let them help me. I was just being very independent, like I can do this on my own, or I'm capable of doing this. But then it sets up a very uncomfortable position for people if you're always helping them, but you don't allow them to help you. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. And I remember the first time that I opened up and let somebody help me, it was like I saw the relief, in the person's behavior. They were just so relieved that I finally was letting them in to help. So that makes it much more of a two-way street, So that's important to remember, that to be open to letting people help you. And then, there's this concept. There was that movie called, I don't know if it was called that, but it was all about passing it forward. So maybe the person who helps you, they're not the person that you help, but there might be somebody else that you can help. Yeah. So it all comes out in the wash. Now, there was one other sutta, Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 46, number 63, where the Buddha encourages us to develop compassion along with the factors of awakening. So not just to have compassion all by itself, isolated, but to develop it with the factors of awakening. So he says, and he's talking to monks, but let's say meditators. We'll translate that into meditators. Meditators, compassion, if cultivated and made much of, is of great fruit and great profit. And then the Buddha asks, and how is compassion cultivated and made much of? And then he answers, by developing the awakening factor of mindfulness along with compassion based on seclusion and dispassion. So the first factor of awakening is mindfulness. So he's saying develop this mindfulness with compassion based on seclusion and dispassion. So based on seclusion means that we take time to find a quiet place, to be secluded from, noise or other people or whatever. And then hopefully to be secluded from the hindrances in our mind. So that's the seclusion part. And dispassion, this is what the sort of definition of dispassion is. It's being calm, objective, free from strong emotions or biases. So in this way, we'll have clarity and we'll be able to see reality. But if we're emotional about something, have strong emotions happening, or we have a strong opinion that may not be based on reality, then it clouds our vision of what is reality. So that's what's meant by dispassion. So then the Buddha just goes through the different, all the factors of awakening. So as I said, the first is mindfulness. So this is what our meditation practice is sort of helping us develop. Like if we're with our breath as our meditation object, then we're learning how to stay with that and not be running off and proliferating in different directions, but staying with our breath. And then in our day-to-day life, just being totally aware of what we're doing rather than being on automatic pilot. And then the second factor of awakening, it's called discrimination of states. There was another translation which is not coming to my mind right now. But basically this factor of awakening boils down into understanding with what we're thinking or doing or speaking. Is it wholesome or unwholesome? Is it helpful to us or not helpful to us? And so the unwholesome things, the unhelpful things are the hindrances. And then the wholesome things, the helpful things, are these factors of awakening. So it's just looking in. If we realize that a hindrance is up, then we want to let go of it. If we realize it's a factor of awakening, then we want to develop it and, cultivate it to increase. So these first two factors, mindfulness and discrimination of states, is an analogy is you're pedaling your bicycle uphill, because these take a bit of effort. So you're pedaling uphill, but after these two, you're at the top of the hill and everything else is coasting downhill on your bicycle. So all the other factors are just a natural unfolding from the first two. So I love this because it really makes our meditation practice simple. Like, it's very clear and it's very simple. So the third factor is energy. And this just arises naturally when we let go of the hindrances, because the hindrances kind of weigh us down. And so when we let go of those, then energy arises. And then what follows on from energy is joy, piti. And piti, or joy, has a bit of an energetic quality to it. And then this evolves into a quieter state we call tranquility. The Pali word is passaddhi. And then this even quiets further into the stillness of samadhi, which are the jhana states, like the deep states of stillness. And then the final factor of awakening is equanimity. Equanimity is this sort of unflappable calm, regardless of whether something wonderful is going on or something tragic is going on. And that just evolves from seeing reality and just realizing, okay, well, this is how it is, so you're able to stay calm. And then the final citation I found about compassion in the Pali Canon was how the Brahma Viharas, how these beautiful qualities of the heart can be used as antidotes to some hindrances. So for metta, loving friendliness, they say that it's the antidote to ill will. So having a heart that's feeling loving kindness to all. That's an antidote to ill will. And then for compassion, they say, for it is the heart's release by compassion that is the escape from thoughts of harming. So compassion is the opposite of that. And that citation is from Digha Nikaya number 33. Then I was listening to a talk by a woman called Tanisra. She used to be a nun, but she disrobed some time ago, but has continued to really work to spread the word of the Buddha. And she gave a quote and said, "The expression of wisdom is compassion." So if we're wise, that's what our heart's going to feel. It's going to feel compassion if we have wisdom. And then Mudita sent me this lovely painting. And so this is a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, that wonderful Vietnamese monk. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, "The most effective way to show compassion to another is to listen rather than to talk." Okay, so that was all I was able to find on compassion. So I'll open it now for stories or discussion, questions. Yeah, just a second here.